What's up, everybody? Hey guys, it's Tyler with Hooksets. Hope you're having a great day. It is Saturday night, October 9th, 2021. It's a little bit late here, about 9:45 or 10 till 10 my time. So it's almost midnight on the East Coast. I don't expect a lot of people to be jumping in here to hang out tonight, but um, you never know. So I thought I would hop on, given that I said last night that I might be on tonight, and thought I'd at least show you guys what I'm rocking in just this single 3600 size flambeau box that is going to be kind of my go-to lures for fall fishing here in the next couple of weeks. I am drinking a little bit of Evan Williams bottled in bond bourbon tonight. How's it going, Matt? Not too much on my end, man. Hope you had a good day. Did you catch them? I know you said last night that you were going to go out on the water today and had a game plan in mind. So, how'd you do? I'm going to give people just a couple of minutes to hop in here before I just kind of run through this tackle box that I've got loaded up with what I'm going to be using for the majority of fall fishing. And keep in mind this box is subject to change on a day-to-day basis. So it is not the be all end all by any means, but it mostly covers my bases in terms of what I am going to use um, primarily throughout the fall. So, sorry, just getting a couple texts. Think it is my wife, and she suggested that maybe she and her work friends might hop on and watch the stream. So I kind of hope that's not the case. Uh, just because you know she thinks I'm a nerd, and I know I am when it comes to fishing gear. So we shall see. But for everybody, anybody who's watching right now, hope you guys are doing quite well. Um, I had a pretty casual day with my kids today. Um, just classic kids activities. My daughters are sick yet again for like the third or fourth time in the last month or so. So absolutely crazy. Matt says, "Yeah, I was gonna go, man, but ended up going to get a reel spooled up and a couple other things. So I'm gonna go tomorrow for sure." What do you mean you went to get a reel spooled up? You don't spool your own reels, bro? What's up, Anthony? How you doing? He said, "Man, after trying to rack my brain, I ended up using my backpack and just packing it with all my gear." Haha. That is pretty hilarious. Um, yeah, it can be difficult and annoying to go through all of your stuff to try and decide what exactly you can fit inside a single box. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight. This is kind of the box that I've got that should cover most of my needs for fall fishing when it comes to hard baits. Of course, then I will bring some soft plastics as well. But for the most part, in the fall, I'm trying to throw moving baits, and so we're going to kind of run through my more or less top 5 techniques, but what I've got loaded up in this 3600 size box. What's up, Sean? How you doing tonight, man? Anthony says I tried to go light, but it didn't work. I totally hear you, and that ends up usually happening with me too. I bring a standard size backpack or a smaller backpack, and I usually end up taking like 1 or 2 boxes this size and 1 or 2 boxes this size and probably 10 or 20 bags of soft plastics and some terminal tackle. So yeah, I end up just jamming it all in, dude. But Sean, all day on the lake, how'd you do, man? What were you throwing, and what did you catch them on? And that says, nah, not for braid, man. You need to use a spool machine because you want that braid extremely tight. So the braid doesn't dig into the spool or get any casting break off. Um, yeah, man, I don't usually have many issues with that. I do keep extreme tension on the line while I'm spooling it, but I have never used a spool machine. Never gone anywhere to have my line spooled up, but I'm not hating on you or anybody who might end up going in to a store in order to get their reel spooled up, whether it's for braid or otherwise. But yeah, I'll just use a paper towel and hold tension on the line, um, kind of as tight as I can as I'm reeling it on there. And I rarely have issues. You know, if you get a backlash, the braid's gonna dig in. I mean, that's just part of the game. So yeah, casting breakoffs are usually just because the lure is too heavy and the braid is too light, and it's a casting error. If you're trying to bomb something out there that you shouldn't be, when really you should be lob casting it, that makes a big difference. So Anthony says, I'm on a football high. The OU versus Texas game was amazing. What a comeback. I did not watch that game, man, but I'll probably try to watch some highlights given that you said the game was so sweet. You know, I'm a big NFL fan. I play fantasy football and am a diehard Denver Broncos fan. So, you know, I went to a Division III college in Texas called Trinity University, and while our football team was good for our conference, uh, it's just not the same type of atmosphere or environment. Um, Although I will say that my college, when I was there, this was probably in 2008, maybe 2009, uh, did make national headlines. It was all over ESPN. Even was nominated for like an ESPY award because at the time we had, I think, the longest play in college football history. It was like a minute and 6 seconds long. The last play of the game, we hurdled the ball probably 15 times and ended up scoring to win the game on the last play. And the announcer of that game and for our football team was part of my poker group. The dude got famous like overnight because he lost his mind on that play. So you could always look that up on YouTube or otherwise. Trinity University uh, lateral. Sorry, I said hurdle. I meant lateral. Uh, but yeah, the play ends with a dude throwing it cross field and it bouncing off the ground. And because it was a backwards pass, totally legal, but the other team kind of stopped in their tracks because they saw the ball hit the ground. They thought it was a dead ball. And then, boom, our guy just sprinted the last 20, 25 yards in for the touchdown. So, pretty sweet. Sean says, very slow day on the water. We just went junk fishing, frog, small swim baits, flipping grass. Well, that sounds fun. The flapping frog from Spro did some work, huh? Interesting. I've been thinking about getting that frog, but you know, I've already got kind of my toads and those style baits already set, and so I like how that bait is supposed to kind of blur the lines between those two categories. But tell me a little bit about that bait and why you like it. What makes it unique? I know that it's made from like an elastomer type of plastic and is stretchy and super durable. But is it hollow and does it float, or do you still have to reel it quickly on top like you would a standard solid body soft plastic toad? Um, it looks like an interesting bait for sure. What's up, Chris Shoemaker? New sub. Found you on Debo's channel. I appreciate it, man. Good to have you in here. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the compliments on the content. You like the jerkbait arsenal. Cool. Well, feel free to request anything that you'd like to see, whether it's during this live stream or on another one. I'm going to go through this 3600 size box that I've got loaded up for fall fishing. Right now is just kind of some of my top fall fishing lures. Now, like I mentioned 10 minutes ago, this is not a be all end all. I will rotate some of these exact baits out. But for the most part, these techniques are what I'm utilizing for the next month or so before things really cool off. In fact, it's possible that in a month from now, our waters could be half frozen. So, yeah, it's interesting. We're going to have freezing low temperatures for the majority of this upcoming week. So, I would assume that fishing will get good for a short period of time, and then we'll get tough again, and then winter's going to hit us just like that. So I've only got 6 weeks until ski season opens, and then I'm hitting the slopes, boys. I'll probably do some fly fishing throughout the winter as well. But yeah, it's crazy to think that this year is almost over. I've been trying to take it in a little bit and think about lessons that I've learned, how many fish that I've caught, what I've been catching them on all year long. But it's been a good season of bass fishing for sure. Matt says, line to get deeper and deeper, and then when you go cast on the next throw, you're usually going to break it off. I've never cast a bait off, but always see guys that do. That do their own braid, always casting off lures. Interesting. Yeah, it doesn't happen to me all that often. So I hear you, man. Sean says it caught fish. It's a hollow body and it floats. Okay, sweet. That's good to know. I had a feeling it might float because it's made from a buoyant plastic, but I didn't know it was hollow. Good hookup ratio, you say, huh? Didn't miss a single fish all day. Yeah, I tend to have a good hookup ratio on baits like that as well. In fact, I've got the one. Whoa. This is probably the closest thing that I have and use to it, and it's the Stanley Top Toad. Showed you guys this one a week or two ago. Obviously, I've got it rigged on this setup right now, but very similar bait in that it floats and it's a buzzing style hollow body frog / toad. It's designed to go with this Stanley double take frog, which has a screw lock in the front. This bait has a solid nose and a hollow belly. Incredibly good hookup ratio and good action too. So, yeah, I mean, I had heard good things about that frog, but didn't ultimately pull the trigger on it when I placed my order from Discount Tackle the other day. So I'm kind of regretting it when you say that you're going to order some more right away. And it doesn't fill up with water either. Interesting. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I've given people a few minutes, 13 minutes, in fact, to get in here. So I'm going to just show you what's in this box for fall fishing. And I'd love to know your guys' opinions, your comments, whether you use any of these baits or have your own personal preferences and favorites for this time of year. So I'll just start first with the top and work my way down. And in the top is some topwater walking baits. Now, because I have been tying some of these on as of late, I don't have my hair ties on these bad boys, so I will go ahead and manage these hooks while we're at it, and I'm loading them back in the box because as I fish these things, I tend to take these rubber bands off and then forget to put them back on, and that's just part of the game, So, first bait that I'll talk about is the Jackal Kick Knocker. So this is essentially the Reaction Innovations Vixen in a new package, a new body. So this guy was released just a couple years ago. It has a relatively thin walled plastic, very high pitched rattle. It's got a knocker in the back and then some BBs up front. So this is a custom color from the hookup tackle, and love it. I've got both custom colors from the hookup tackle actually in this box right now, one in each size. So what you'll see as a theme in this box is that I tend to switch between bigger baits and smaller baits throughout the fall, or average size baits and smaller baits. I don't throw a lot of giant baits in the fall. I tend to do that more in the spring, but depending on the size of the bait and the size of the fish that I'm getting bit on, I will switch some of these up. So Anthony says, I need a 0 to 3 foot crank for bank fishing. What are your suggestions? You will see one or two of them in here in a few minutes. So just hang tight, man. What's up, Daniel T? How you doing, man? Yellow Magic Havanas walk like a charm. I don't have any of those, but that's an interesting suggestion. So the Jackal Kick Knocker is one that walks with ease. This is kind of like the Spook and the Super Spook Junior, right? So one's like a 5-inch and one's like a 4-inch. They both walk extremely easily and are made to cover a lot of water. So this is a bait that you can walk really fast, and it will spit just a little bit of water because of that cupped face on it. But for the most part, these things are going to walk forward, back and forth, probably covering some 6 inches, maybe upwards of a foot side to side as you're walking it. So it's got a very rhythmic action, very appealing sound that is super loud and will call fish up. So fall time is a great time to catch fish on top water. Of course, we could talk about buzz baits and such, but I'm not going to go down that road tonight. So there's really only 2 top waters that I've included in this box, and one of them is a walking bait. So the next walking bait I want to talk about that falls into the same category is the Lucky Craft Sammy. So I've mentioned this one. This is the Sammy 108, 105. Either way, it's their newer Sammy that has 3 hooks on it. So, in the original version, you used to have to step up to like a really large, like a 128. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they have a 3-hook Sammy that is big, but otherwise the Sammy 100, the Sammy 85, the Sammy 115 are all 2-hook baits. But they've come out with this newer version in the last couple of years, which has 3 hooks on it, and it's made from a little bit different plastic. So it's, again, kind of like that Kick Knocker. It's like a little bit more hollow of a body, kind of like a thin-walled plastic. But to me, that I have not noticed any difference in the action of this bait and how it so smoothly walks through the water. And in my opinion, 3 hooks are better than 2 when it comes to topwater baits and jerk baits, which we're going to talk about. I always prefer 3 hooks over 2. And there are only a few circumstances where I will decide that I'm okay with just 2. So next bait is the 6th Sense Catwalk walking bait. And this one has a different shape to it and a different action. So if you listen, it's just got a deeper one knocker sound to it. But because of that keeled belly, this thing actually dips under the water as it walks. So it kind of goes subsurface an inch or two before it comes back up. And has a pretty appealing action, totally different sound than the others that I've showed you so far. So all three of those baits, four of those baits, are designed mostly to cover water and find fish. Yeah, I totally agree, man. In general, with pretty much all walking baits, where I'm using them to cover water, I will tie a loop knot. So you're absolutely right, Sean. Anthony, my man. The hair ties come in clutch, man. Did I mention that on Debo's channel? I think so. You know, he and Randizzle were kind of mind blown by this concept right here, that you can just tuck these hooks away by wrapping one of these kids' hair ties that are tiny, you know, just are really tight, barely fit around your finger. And what I do is grab it onto the back hook, wrap around that front hook, and do a loop around that middle hook so it doesn't come free. And I'll show you why I wrap it around that middle hook right here. So as I put the front two trebles together, you know, tuck them all up. If I just put it on like that, what happens is that then this middle treble hook will come loose and just kind of start to do its own thing, and it will end up getting tangled in other baits. So I just wrap it around the shank of that guy, and then it's not going anywhere. Okay. Yeah, no, you're right, Anthony. That's true, Matt. I use a snap on swim baits, but not on walking baits, and that's a good point. You know, if you are going to swap out walking baits, so for example, if I knew I was going out during low light conditions, if it was early morning or later in the evening, and I knew that there was a good chance that I'm at least throwing top water, if not likely to get bit on top water, then yeah, I'd probably throw a snap. Just tie direct to a snap, and then be able to swap out baits just like that. I like the Spro Prime snaps. Those ones are pretty sweet. Really easy to change out your baits. So the last walking bait is the Evergreen Shower Blows. And this is the 125 size. This is kind of that middle 3-hook size. If you wanted to downsize, the 105 size is also a great option and still has 3 hooks. So this guy's going to fall into the same category as that Kick Knocker Pup. Size-wise, you see they line up pretty much exactly the same. But you're going to use the shower blows for a little bit different of a technique. So once you've gotten on top of some fish and you know where they're hanging out, if you've caught a couple of fish in the same area, then I would pull out the shower blows. Or if you are fishing around very high percentage areas, the shower blows is the way to go, because this is not a bait for covering water, but rather for walking in place. So this guy sits ass down more than the other ones, but as you start walking it, it's going to walk side to side in place, barely cover any water, and because of that cupped mouth, it is going to spit and throw a lot of water, and it has a knock to it that is just a little different than what you get out of like that Catwalk from 6th Sense. So one other thing that you'd notice as kind of a common theme in these baits that I'm showing you, and you will see it throughout this entire box, is that I throw a lot of bone and I throw a lot of chrome in the fall. So I think it was actually Rich from Hellabass left a comment on one of my videos not long ago saying, bone, chrome, or go home in the fall. And yeah, for the most part, I do agree with that. So I throw a lot of chrome and I throw a fair amount of bone as well. So topwater walking baits are number one that I want to talk about. And while we're still on the topic of topwater, and still kind of on the topic of what I just mentioned, if you actually find yourself on top of some fish, if you know where they're located and you are no longer trying to cover water to find fish, then I would go to a popper. Okay. A popper is a bait that I used to not have a ton of confidence in. And this year, it's been super productive for me. You know, a variety of different poppers. So the original Rebel Pop R, not even the original, but the more modern day Rebel Pop R, the Rapala X Rap Pop, the 6th Sense. What do they call this bait? This is one that I have in the box. They call it the Splashback, and this is the 70 size. And you know, the Yellow Magic Magnum popper I've got sitting here. That's a good walking popper. And so here's the deal. The three that I have in my box right now do slightly different jobs. First up is the Berkeley Bullet Pop, which is a little bit of a newer bait to me. It has almost the reverse shape as that Catwalk that I just showed you. It's got a keeled back to it. Yow. So can you see that keeled back and then more of a flat belly? This thing walks well and it pops well, and is an extremely good value bait. So far, I'm impressed with this thing, and I find that this will be kind of a do-it-all type of popper for me. But this is their middle size, and this is the 70, Bullet Pop 70. They make a 60, 70, and an 80. And in my opinion, the 80 is a little bit big. I don't like the action quite as well. And the 60 is rather small. So I have some favorites when it comes to small poppers, and one of them is the Rebel Pop R. So this is their quarter-ounce size popper. This is, again, a bone color. All of these poppers are bone. I have not switched out this feather treble hook, which I ought to ASAP. I've switched out the middle treble for an EWG. Looks like it's a Gamakatsu bronze EWG, but I really like the action and the sound that the Rebel Pop R puts out. So the Bullet Pop has kind of a middle of the road sound, and the Pop R has that very high pitched rattle. Whereas the 6th Sense Splashback has a very deep cup, a keeled belly, and no rattles. This thing is silent and it walks really well in place. It spits a lot of water. It does not make a classic bloop sound like the Rebel Pop R does. So I will work that Rebel Pop R straight back to me a little bit quicker, uh, and just try to make that blooping sound the whole way back. The Bullet Pop, I will mix up my retrieve, and the 6 cent splashback, I will actually walk a bit slower. And they all put out different sounds, right? Chris says, I'm a girl dad too, and I've started taking a bunch of my daughter's hair bands. Got that from you. That's hilarious. Yeah, man. I keep them in this little Plano box. So after stealing a bunch of my daughters for like, I don't know, a season or so, I ended up just going to Walmart and buying a pack or two of them myself. You can get, 500 of them for a couple bucks. So um, it takes me a season or two to go through them. I've actually got a couple different kinds in here. Some of them have better color selection than others, but I've ended up buying like two of these packs over the last couple of seasons. So I'm still working on the end of that initial pack, and I've really dipped into the new pack. But let's go on to technique number 2. I mean, technically, I just covered 2 techniques with topwater walking baits and topwater poppers. Matt says, I use small rubber bands, but the hair ties are probably cheaper. Maybe even can get them off of Amazon for cheaper. Yeah, probably so, to be honest with you. I mean, they're dirt cheap, even at Walmart, dude. So, yeah, it doesn't matter what you use. I don't think it's going to be expensive no matter. But great way to keep things contained without having to buy those plastic hook covers, which actually do take up a lot of room, and they don't uh, tuck the hooks out of the way. So, Alan, how you doing, man? Thank you for asking. Um, yeah, which bone color are you talking about? Because I've shown a lot of bone baits over the last few minutes. But let's talk about lipless crankbaits. Okay, there are a few ways that I like to fish lipless crankbaits, and especially during the fall. And I'm gonna cover probably all 4 ways that you can and would fish a lipless crankbait. So let's just go through them real quick. Anthony says, I have a tendency to throw smaller baits. I don't have many baits over half an ounce. Most of my chatterbaits, jigs, spinner baits are all 3/8. Need to get some poppers. Yeah, man. Uh, 3/8 ounce size poppers are the deal. You definitely do need to get them. I would say middle of the summer it's tough to beat a popper. But yeah, I am with you. I throw a lot of 3/8 ounce baits. I like quarter ounce with a lot of my moving baits more so than half ounce or heavier, but depends on the technique. Berkeley Bullet Pop's the only one that you'll have to get soon. Yeah, man, especially from Discount Tackle, they're less than $6, man. Great bait, and they're versatile. What's up, Miguel? How you doing, man? What are my thoughts on a red front hook? I like it. I do it sometimes. I'm not religious about that, um, but I do buy into that idea. I do not rig up the majority of my baits with that. I'm more likely to do it with topwater baits than I am um, with moving baits. Say with a lipless crankbait. I might do it with a jerk bait from time to time, but with baits that they're going to inspect and then quickly make a knee jerk reaction to and go after, you're more likely to get them to slap at the bait, try and stun the bait. And in that instance, they will usually go for that red hook as opposed to the back of the bait. And so your odds of hooking the fish when they slap at the bait go up. So I like the idea of it. And again, I do it some. I've got a couple of baits rigged up right now with that. I've got Strike King KVD 2.5 wake bait at the moment that I've swapped out both of the hooks. So the front hook I swapped out for a red mustad triple grip, that short shank EWG that's a size 2, so big red hook in the front, and then on the back I've got a smaller size 4 owner ST36 hook that I've tied some feathers onto. So feather treble hook on the back, and that's a round bend, and then a red EWG on the front. That is a combination that I definitely do like. Anthony says, I got a question. Do you have a tendency to buy the more one knocker baits or louder multi BB sounds? You find yourself liking the one knocker sounds better. It depends on the bait. So when it comes to topwater walking baits, probably a one knocker, just a little bit better. But I do like the combination of different BBs. And when it comes to a lipless crankbait, I find myself using a one knocker a little bit less than I throw a standard multi BB, but I do have both. I hear you, Alan. You like that bone color in the bullet pop. Okay. Matt says he loves baits that have a yellow tinted bone. I don't know why, but in a crank, man, they love that. I don't know why. It's like my confidence color besides brown and bluegill color for topwater and cranks. So what about the river to sea whopper plopper bone color? That is like yellow, dude. I don't love it. But no, I prefer kind of like a standard bone color pattern. Sometimes I even like more of like a white, like this oyster from Strike King. I'm going to talk about that bait in a second. So first way that I'd retrieve a lipless crankbait is by yo-yoing it up off the bottom. Fishing it deep, fishing it close to the bottom. Especially early in the fall when fish are still transitioning from deeper haunts and starting to work their way up shallow. In the middle of the fall, I will do less of that. I will start burning a lipless crankbait. I will yo-yo it some throughout the middle of the water column, but I will rarely fish a lipless crankbait up off the bottom as the water starts cooling down. And then as the water really is cold and the fish kind of chill out and are done feeding up, then I might go back to this technique in the middle of winter. Like this would be a good ice fishing technique, to be honest. But both of these baits, the Lucky Craft LV500 and the Jackal TN70, are awesome baits for this job. So both of these baits are made to nose down and also made to sit on the bottom with their nose down and their tail up. So as you work the bait, it will climb like this. These baits run almost up and down. So in my opinion, they're great for a lift and drop technique, but they are heavier, and that is why. So the LV500 weighs 3/4 of an ounce, is a 3-inch long lipless crankbait. It has multiple types of BBs inside it, as you might be able to see there: brass and glass and tungsten. You can't see the internals of this TN70 right now because the one that I have in this box is a chrome color. So if you listen to the sound, the LV500 is obnoxiously loud, and so is the TN70. Both very loud lipless crankbaits and good for fishing close to the bottom. You can fish them otherwise, but I just generally choose not to do that. They're a little bit harder to work in other ways. So next up is more of like a burning style retrieve. And there are two baits that I like to do that with most. And Miguel says, "What's up? There's a popper with a lip and a prop in the back. A lip and a prop in the back. There are some poppers with props in the back, but the popper with the lip in the front is the Booyah Prank. Um, I'm not sure what you're talking about when it comes to the prop, because there are a handful of baits on the market that do that. There's a Lucky Craft. There is the one that I thought you were talking about was the Jackal Binksy. That guy has a blade on the bottom and a prop on the back, but a lip, I'm not quite sure. I really thought it was the Booyah Prank until you said the prop. So I don't know, man. Yeah, you're right, Daniel. The red hook is more of a target than a trigger. So as fish are reacting to a bait, they're more likely to swipe or eat that part of the bait, especially when they're biting and blowing the bait out as opposed to engulfing the entire bait. So when you get them to hit the front of the bait, you increase your chances of hooking up on either or all three of the hooks when that front hook is red. Sean says he stays away from bone because it gets thrown a lot there. That's always a good strategy, man. And I don't blame you for doing that. Yeah, Matt, you can like that bone color all you want from river to sea, but I don't. But I totally agree that the loon, that black color, gets bit so damn well. So yeah, I throw it like 75% of the time too, man. Interesting. The Jackal 007. Yeah, it doesn't have a prop on the back, but the Jackal riser bait. That's more of a specialized bait, one that I do not have in this box. It's a very lightweight lure. So let's talk about. Yeah, see, Sean, I don't know about that. The double prop baits, that Lucky Craft, essentially the same thing as this Berkeley spin bomb. This guy's got two plastic props, front and back on it, but no lip, right? I mean, this is a prop bait, but I've also added a bladed treble onto the bottom of that guy. So let's talk about burning lipless crankbaits. There are two baits that I do this with for the most part. And one is a very cheap bait on the market, and that is the Cotton Cordell Super Spot. This guy is relatively lightweight for its size, and it's got a really good action to it. As you can hear, it's a relatively high pitch. It's got 1,000,000 BBs inside it. And this thing actually has a decent amount of tail kick to it. So it runs at about, not quite a 45. It almost runs upright. But a lot of lipless crankbaits will run down. As you can see, the line tie is a little bit closer to the head on this bait. And so it runs at about this angle right here, which causes it to have just a little bit more tail shake. It's going to give it more flash, and it runs higher in the water column more easily. Now, it is one that you do want to change out your hardware. I've got triple grips on the front and back of that one for some reason. Sometimes when it comes to lipless crankbaits, I will throw EWGs on the front and the back. But the next bait that I tend to fish high in the water column and burn is the striking Red Eye Shad. And again, I like to throw this in shad patterns. This is the oyster color, which is more of like a classic bone color. This is a standard Red Eye Shad. I've put Gamakatsu EWG trebles on there. And then this one is the natural shad color pattern. And I've got round bend hooks on it. But this guy is the 2-tap version. So you get that one knocker. So I like to have a little bit of options on me when I'm fishing lipless crankbaits. And speaking of options, well, I don't want to forget mentioning that the Red Eye Shad is kind of an underrated lipless crankbait. One, because it does ride high in the water column fairly well. You can burn this thing easily and it will stay up. But two, when you kill it, this thing's going to shimmy on the way down. It works well retrieving it any which way you want. So this is a bait that you can work however. So I will switch out the Cotton Cordell Super Spot and the striking Red Eye Shad when fishing a lipless higher in the water column. If I see that fish are feeding on small bait, then I will downsize and go to something like the Yozuri Rattlin vibe. I mentioned this bait a couple of times, once on Debo's stream, once or twice since then. I have this bait in a lot of different color patterns, and I like it quite a lot. So, you know, whether you're throwing it in silver, gold, black, bluegill, doesn't matter. Their larger sizes look a little bit more typical. You know, this is like their half-ounce size, but it weighs 5/8 of an ounce. This guy right here is like their 1/4 ounce size, but it weighs 3/8. So it begins to play in a similar category as like a half-ounce lipless, but can be fished a little bit more in that upper portion of the water column on traditional casting gear. You don't need to throw this on a spinning setup because it's 3/8 of an ounce, but it will have a little bit more subtle of an action. It's got high pitch rattles, and is good on more of a straight retrieve. So if they're feeding on small bait, I will downsize my lipless, but I prefer to still throw my stuff on casting gear. So the last lipless that I do want to mention is the 6 cents Quake 80 suspending lipless crankbait. We talked about suspending lipless crankbaits. There's the 6 cents Quake 80 and the IMA suspending vibe. I generally like the size and the color patterns in this guy just a little bit better. And it's got a more dynamic action to it. So this bait is kind of a hybrid style lure that you can throw, and it will fish in the middle of the water column. So 3 to 4 feet is where it wants to be. And it's really not going to fall any deeper than that. So once you start working it, it will crank down to 3 or 4 feet, and you can kill it, and that thing will stop and stay exactly where it is. It suspends. So pretty sweet. Let me catch up on some of these comments. Sorry. Matt says, caught one of my biggest snakeheads on a chrome lipless. 9 pounds, 32 inch. Broke the rear hook hanger. Bent the hooks all up. Interesting. You need to try the Warhawk Sergeant lipless with swiveling hook hangers for $10 bait, $9. Interesting. Yeah, swiveling hook hangers are awesome on any bait. So I am down with that. And thanks for the recommendation, man. Alan says, what do you think of a blade bait? I like blade baits, but I see them as more of a dead of winter or dead of summer type of technique. Um, I tend to fish more from the bank than from a boat, so I don't fish blade baits very often. It is more of a vertical jigging type of technique. You are going to hang up and lose a lot of blade baits while fishing them. So, a lot of guys that fish blade baits end up pouring their own. That said, I still have some, and we'll throw them from time to time. But it's just not a bread and butter lure for me. Chris says not typical lipless, but have you thrown the Megabass Battalion? No, I mean I wouldn't call that a Battalion. That's a swim bait. Um, but no, I do not have any of the Battalions. That is a jointed swim bait. uh, more than a lipless crankbait. One lipless that I did not mention that definitely gets an honorable mention for me is the Duo Realis Apex Vibe 100. If you want to go the opposite route of downsizing and you want to upsize your lipless crankbait, that is a 4-inch lipless crankbait that weighs just over an ounce and can be slow rolled through the middle of the water column. It's got a little bit different of an action and is definitely a cool bait, but doesn't fit easily inside a 3600 size box. And I also don't throw it all that often because it does need a little bit more specialized gear than, say, what I would throw most lipless crankbaits on. Okay. Yeah, the Vibration X is probably more the standard lipless crankbait from Megabass though. So next category is shallow diving crankbaits, specifically square bill crankbaits, but I do want to cross over just a little bit here. So I have talked to you guys extensively about the fact that when it comes to square bill crankbaits, I pretty much limit myself to two kinds. I do not venture out a whole lot with square bill crankbaits. So my top choice, day in and day out, is the Lucky Craft LC 1.5. It's affordable, it's consistent, and it comes in some awesome color patterns. So the stock hooks that come on these are okay. They're a little bit better than crappy, but I usually do switch these out. Not all of these have been switched out. I want to say that they come with some decent VMC hooks on them that are relatively sticky. So I don't always switch them out, but I do check them. I will sometimes sharpen them. So here's more of like a shad type of pattern with some flash. Here is more of like a natural shad pattern. And here's what happens with these hair ties eventually, right? Is they break. And then the third one that I've got in the box is more of like a Chartreuse Shad in what Lucky Craft calls the CF, which has this internal flash to it. So it's going to put off a lot of light. So the Lucky Craft LC 1.5s are silent square bill crankbaits with a good action, good deflection. I'm a fan of them. Now the Strike King KVD 1.5 square bills are the other one that I throw a lot of, and so I will carry those around as well. And I've got a couple color patterns that I carry in my box. This is a little bit unique of a color pattern. I don't even know what they call it. Maybe it's called Live River Shad or something like that. It has like a black and blue top and then like a almost bluegillish type of side with a white belly. This is kind of a do everything color. And then this is just a classic gizzard shad color pattern. It's a white with a black top. And I've done really well on this color pattern over the years. Both of these are actually the Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's exclusive rattling versions. So the original KBD 1.5 is a silent square bill, but you can get them in rattling versions from Bass Pro and Cabela's. So I will throw those. Now, last year they just came out with the newer hard knock version. Ow. Hard knock of the 1.5 square bill. So this is a color pattern I don't throw a lot in the fall, but I've had great success on it in the Red Eye Shad and also in the 1.5 square bill. So as you can hear, it's a very different knocker than the rattle version of the 1.5. So you get some different sounds there. And then lastly, I will sometimes step down my presentation size-wise. Again, if they're on smaller bait, you go down from the 1.5 to the 1. 1.0 is a sleeper of a square bill crankbait, and it dives just a little bit shallower than the 1.5. So anyway, if I'm fishing around rock, if I'm fishing around wood, I do really like to throw a square bill crankbait. Now, there are a couple honorable mentions for shallow diving crankbaits that I do want to mention that I will throw in the fall, because these square bills really do best, well, as do pretty much all crankbaits, but when deflecting and deflecting off of wood, for example. But they're going to dive in that 2 to 5 foot ballpark. So there are a couple of baits that run a little bit shallower or act a little bit different that I want to talk about. Wow, I love that you guys are chitting and chatting, and I'm sorry that I'm not totally caught up on these. So here's that green tomato Red Eye Shad. Kind of reminds me of this 6th Sense. You know, this is the Curve 55X, or I don't know if it's X, but Curve 55 crankbait. It's a medium diving crankbait, and this is like their lava truce color, very similar to that green tomato from Strike King. So 6th Sense Mini 25 crank is killer, says Alan. That's one that I actually don't have any experience with, so good to hear that. I will check that out at some point. I like the Academy H2O Express square bills, says Anthony. They're less than $5, come with VMC hooks. I think they're really nice. Never had any issues, and they run true. Yeah, I've heard the Academy stuff is actually pretty decent, but I don't have any Academies near me in Colorado, and have never really gone out of my way to pick up their stuff. I'm not really going to shop online at Academy to order some of their in-house brands, if we're being honest. The Jackal Aska is still your all-time favorite square bill, Sean. That's cool. That is one that I've never thrown. Tell us, what do you like about the Jackal Aska and the Megabass Knuckles? Well, adjustable lips. Okay, so that tells us. Matt says, all I use is silent cranks, besides lipless. Really don't catch many fish on loud baits, besides snakeheads or smaller fish. Interesting. Yep. Depsy Vogue. Yep, we all know that by now. You mentioned that a lot over the last couple of weeks. So 4 crankbaits that I think are worth noting, okay? First up is the Rapala Dt4. This is an awesome year-round bait. You know, the DT6 gets a lot of love, but the DT4 does not get enough love. This is a balsa wood crankbait. Um, Dives 2-4 feet, but it can be fished in super skinny water. So I fish this in anything from 1 to 4 feet of water, and I find that it performs best in 2, 3, maybe 4 feet of water, but 2 and 3 feet of water, this thing is ideal. So I've got a bunch of these DT4s, and this is really cool color pattern called Big Shad, black, purple, and like a grayish silver with the chartreuse line down it. And the DT4, unlike the 6, 10, 14, they'd all have a very subtle, quiet rattle to them. This guy has like a single BB in it that makes a decent amount of noise. So I like that. If we're staying on shallow diving round bill crankbaits, here's a sleeper that nobody really talks about, and this is the Lucky Craft CB100. So they make the Moon Salt series in a couple different baits. Originally, it was just this CB line of baits. They make a like a waking version that is like a CB50, and then a shallow diving CB100, a mid diver that's the 200, and a deep diver like at the 300. But now they make a Moon Salt 1.5 square bill, and I do throw that from time to time as well, but just don't have it in this box right now. Instead, I've got the CB100, and this is a little bit more shaddy of a profile, just a little bit slimmer, but it's got a round body, and this thing dives in the 2, 3. You could get this as deep as 4 or 5 feet if you're throwing it on light line. But what you'll notice about this bait is it's got multiple rattle chambers, and it's got a lot of BBs in it. This thing sounds like a lipless crankbait, but it's a lipped crankbait. So acts a little bit different than most in that regard. So a bit of a crossover bait there. Matt, custom crankbaits. I want to say no. I haven't really gone down that rabbit hole just yet, but one, because I think it's a dangerous game to play, and once I start doing that, then I'll probably do too much of it for no real reason. And then the other that I've talked about a lot is just accessibility to the masses. You know, I like to talk about products that I can get pretty easily myself, and that other people could get access to themselves if they like what they hear and want to pick some up. So there are not a lot of small custom bait makers, crankbait builders who make stuff that is readily available all the time. So usually not trying to get into that game, at least for the time being. Sean says the knuckles are 2 square bills in one bait. Dives 2 feet with the lip snapped down, and 5 to 6 feet with it flipped up. Super tight action. That is cool. No doubt about it. Chris says I can mess him up on a jerkbait, but my confidence level on a square bill is a bit low. Not sure if I'm fishing it too fast or what, but I'll get it sooner or later. Yeah, man. You got to mess with the retrieve, right? Because the fish often want it in different ways. So the main thing is to be making sure that you're making contact with the cover or the structure that you're fishing, is that you're getting that deflection. You know, if you're just fishing it through the middle of the water column, you're not going to get a lot of bites. But if you're banging it into stuff, then you'll start getting bit more. But you can play with the retrieve. You know, a lot of people like a stop and go retrieve. So once it starts grinding and banging into rocks or comes and hits a piece of wood, then you stop it and let it kind of back out before you start working it again. You'll get bit then a lot of the time as it's backing out. Obviously, a balsa wood crank or something like that will back out quicker. So the DT4 has a very high buoyancy, whereas the CB Moonsault series of baits almost have a neutral buoyancy. They very slow float up. So all of that comes into play. A lot of people like to do it like a burn and stop retrieve with shallow diving cranks as well. The Jackal Askas are silent and only run 4 feet deep, but they have more of a roll or wobble and they're erratic. Cool, cool. A man's baby -1. Yep, good bait for sure. Yeah, 0 to 1 feet is more of like a wake bait. Going to talk about that in a second with one of these. And again, one that I've been loving this year is the Strike King KVD 2.5 wake bait. That thing will do the same thing. If you work it on a slow to medium retrieve, it will have a true wake bait action, and it has a knocker in it. So it sounds like that hard knock, but if you fish it faster, it will crank down maybe 3 to 6 inches under the surface and is a pretty sweet bait. Matt says, to me, square bills have a sweet spot, but once you figure that out, man, you'll be catching them left and right. That's what I found out on my own. Might be different for you. Yeah, Anthony, I'm with you, man. Father of a 7 and a 6-year-old, got to be budget minded. I hear you. Zero confidence in jerkbaits, need a budget jerkbait to learn. Yeah. Okay, let's continue down the crank line because I've just got 2 more before we talk about jerkbaits. But this guy here is the Rapala Bx Brat. I don't know why I've got dog hair in the back split ring, but the Bx Brat. And this is the they make it in a big version now. This is the original smaller version, and they make it in 2 diving depths, a 3 and a 6. And as you can tell from this lip, this is the shallower 3-foot diver. Okay. What's cool about the Bx Brat and all Bx baits by Rapala is that they are balsa interiors with a copolymer plastic shell on the outside. So you get the high float, the buoyancy, and the action out of a balsa bait, but you get a little bit more of the durability that you get out of a plastic bait with that shell on it. So the Bx Brat is a great bait. This is a square bill crankbait that has a pretty wild action and does really well. So I like the 3 more than I like the 6, and I have not tried the big Brat yet, but I'm pretty sure it only comes in a 6. So these baits are just a little bit more expensive, but they're silent runners. So unlike the DT4 that has that rattle and is going to do a little bit better in rock with that round bill, this Bx Brat 3 is going to do a little bit better around wood and a little bit better in extra skinny water or around extra pressured fish. And last bait that I'll talk about is a wank. Did I just say wank? A waking crankbait. Not a wank bait, okay? Although that might be a new term. Holy shnikes. So this right here is a wank bait. This is the dual hardcore shad crank. And they make this shad crank in multiple diving depths, but this is the 0 plus. And so as you can see, this has a wake bait style lip on it. This is a foil shad pattern on it. It's got high pitch rattles in it that are almost reminiscent of that Rapala Dt4 I just showed you. But this thing is going to ride on the surface or down to about a foot deep. And this thing is small and lightweight. So I want to say it weighs a quarter of an ounce. I could be wrong, but if you look at it side by side next to the CB100 from Lucky Craft, it's about the same size. And I want to say that the CB100 weighs 3/8 of an ounce, and it's got all those rattles inside it, which contributes to the weight and also the buoyancy. So it's going to slow float back up, whereas the shad crank is going to high float, even want to wake on the surface. Yeah, Sean, that Brat has some wicked wobble. You're right about that. Yeah, the Rip Stop is not a budget jerkbait, Matt, but I am gonna talk about it in 1 second. The old-fashioned Rapala Minnow or the Smithwick Rogue jerkbaits are good. Yep. So are the Bomber Long A's. Alan's caught a lot of pike lately on the Movement 80 from 6 Cents. Cool, man. Yeah, the Movement 80 has some very erratic action. I like the bait, but just haven't seen as much success on it as I've wanted to. And so I haven't put in the time needed. You know what I mean? So here's the Movement 80X. I've also got the Movement 80 Wake. You can see I had this tied on not that long ago. And, ow. That almost punctured the skin. So what's wild about the Movement 80 is that it really has, I guess you could call it a hunting or erratic action, but it has a wide swimming action. Whereas most crankbaits are going to kind of run true, maybe kick off. You know, you can pump your rod and make them kind of do something funny. But this bait just has a really wide path that it swims in. So I haven't had a lot of bites on it, but that's just because of the way that my fish are. So I hear you. Chris, no problem, man. Got to get up before the sun rises. Good having you in here. Thank you for hanging out, man. Tight lines to you as well. See you in the next one, dude. Matt's got the big brats. And Sean says, then I don't want that in my box. That's funny. All right. So, jerkbaits are the last category that I want to talk about. And I've got too many in this category, to be honest, to show you. So, there are 6 jerkbaits that I have in this box. 4 of them I have multiple colors in, but let's just talk about these 6 jerkbaits and why I have these ones in the box. So, first, and what will probably be my go-to during the middle of the fall, is the Lucky Craft Pointer 100. Now, I did just order, this is another spoiler alert for what's coming in my discount tackle order in a couple of days. I ordered one of the H3 versions of this bait. So the Pointer 100 is an awesome bait that you can work very aggressively. It wants to be hit hard, but it is loud. Has a really good slashing action to it. Pretty classic diving depth of like 4 or 5 feet. And comes in some awesome color patterns like this MS American Shad, which I've got a handful of. And only downside is that it's got 2 hooks on it. So that is something that I wish, or I did wish for a while, that they would change, and they did. They didn't change it so much as make a new bait. So same exact bait, same lip, same action. They just changed the hook hangers and put 3 hooks on it instead of 2. So the Lucky Craft Pointer 100 is probably my best bet, my best option, my first that I'd go to in the fall, because it's loud and has that aggressive action. Now, if the bait is smaller or the fish aren't biting it as well, I will often downsize and go to the Pointer 78. The 78 does not have that sound that the 100 has. So it has the crisp darting action of the 100, but it does not have the sound, and it does not have the same profile. It's in a much smaller body. So the Pointer 78 is a great option. If I'm fishing shallower in the water, I will go to either the Jackal re-range or the Rapala Rip Stop. Here is the Rip Stop. This is in the larger size. This is the, what is it, 11, 13, 12. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is the 12 size. They only make this in a 9 and a 12. Couple cool things about the Rip Stop are, one, it's got flat sides. So just like the re-range, this thing dives pretty shallow and it has flat sides. And so it's got a good rolling action and flashing action. So puts off a lot of light as you're working the bait. But because this bait has a hard plastic tail on the rear, it has a very unique action. So you can actually fish this thing on a straight retrieve and stop and go type of retrieve. It fast, you can rip it and jerk it and stop, and this thing will immediately stop and then sit back up. So it runs and jerks a little bit nose down, and then it will back up and slowly rise back to horizontal. It's got a cool action. It's got a lot of different things going on for it. It's got that holographic finish inside the bait, so these paint finishes will last a long time. And then I've also taken it upon myself to put one of these bladed trebles on the middle of this bait as well. As you can see, I don't have the hair tie wrapped around this middle treble, but I will take care of that right meow. So the Rapala Rip Stop is one that I absolutely do love. And if we're on that same train of flashy baits, but perhaps want to go a little bit smaller, then I will go to something like the Dual Hardcore Minnow Flat. And this is in the 95 size. Okay. So another suspending jerkbait that targets that middle of the water column and has flat sides, and therefore puts off a lot of flash. So love a bait like this in a chrome type of pattern. It's going to dive just a little bit deeper than the Rip Stop will. And you can maintain those 3 hooks on a bait that is smaller in size. So this is 95 size. So that Pointer 100 is bigger and only has 2 hooks. That Minnow Flat is a 95 size and has 3 hooks. It's got the flat sides. couple cool things going for it. It also has a magnetic weight transfer system in it that is unique to dual hardcore. So as you can see from this one, these two balls right up front here will shift to the back as you cast it. You will hear a thunk right as you load up to cast. And as you start to work the bait, they will then roll to the front. So it's a silent bait for the most part, but has a magnetic weight transfer system to it. Now, as it gets later in the fall, well, let's talk about earlier in the fall. I can finish on that note. So earlier in the fall, when I'm fishing just a little bit deeper and I want more of a hybrid style bait, the Ima Flit is an underrated jerkbait. This is one that, for its size, is a little bit unique. It's a little bit longer. It's like that 120 size, kind of like that Rip Stop. So if I show you these guys side by side, it's a little bit longer than most jerkbaits that I throw, but it has a slim profile to it. It's like a semi-flat, semi-rounded body, and it's got a really crisp action. But the thing that makes it unique is not just its diving depth, but like I showed you in that moonsault, this is a lipless crankbait that acts like a jerkbait. So, sorry, this is a jerkbait that acts like it sounds like a lipless crankbait. So it's almost the reverse of that 6 Sense Quake 80 suspending lipless crankbait. This is a suspending jerkbait that sounds like a lipless with all those BBs in there. It's got like 3 or 4 different rattle chambers inside the bait, in a pyramidal shape. So pretty sweet there. And then lastly, as we get later in the fall, as the water gets colder, I will then move into, say, more of a Megabass Vision 110 style bait. And I do throw the standard Vision 110, I throw the plus one, and I throw the junior and the junior plus one. I also throw them in the silent version, but this one right here is the Megabass Vision 110 Junior in the matte shad color. So this guy retails for 20 bucks instead of 25. Always good to save $5, but this does dive in that same like 6-foot range and has that same super refined darting action. Is very consistent, and I don't know what to tell you. It suspends as well or better than any of these other baits. A lot of these you will have to tweak a little bit. Many of them slow float or are very sensitive to water temperature. And the Vision 110, especially when you get into colder water temperatures, is super consistent. Great bait. Pricey, but worth it in my mind. And I do have kind of a lot of them. So again, this is the junior size, and kind of like the dual hardcore flat minnow. I love the fact that it's a smaller size. This is probably the exact same size, right about